So I've been considering this proposition that's emerged from the woke end of the political spectrum. Let's say that all white people are racist, and I think, okay, are all white people racist? What's the answer to that? And the answer is yes, and no, and how dare you frame the question like that? That's the three answers. So yes, let's look at yes first. Mm-hmm. Well, are all people racist? Probably. Probably, yeah. Probably. Like, we have really, really intense in-group affiliative tendencies.
And yet we're supposed to suppose that maybe, especially North American white people, can learn to not be racist, unlike all other people in the world. That's a tough proposition.
Well, all of us, it's very difficult for all of us to overcome our in-group biases. And we never even want to do it completely, because we want to love our family specially. And we also only have a limited amount of time and attention. So we have to love some people specially, or do nothing at all for anyone. So this is a huge problem. So by stating it that way, that all white people are racist, you make racism a subcategory of white, and you actually underplay the terrible catastrophe and significance of the problem. And that's very dangerous, because we all have to contend with this in-group preference and our proclivity to demonize anyone we put in the out-group. And that's a terrible tendency.
Yeah, and that question is one of them where I depart from what I wish were my comrades, in that, are all white people racist? You know what? Probably, to some extent. The white person who couldn't have an ounce of racism identified in them, even with sophisticated psychological testing, is probably vanishingly rare. Sure. And my sense of it is, when it's gotten to the point that it has, who cares? And I've often said to audiences, and I've watched some Black people in audiences, having not heard this, understand what I mean. If you really do have a basic self-love, then the fact that the whites around you have various degrees of racism really just shouldn't matter, because life consists of about 1,000 things other than whatever that residual racism is in that white person across the room, who is, married to a Black person and, does all the sorts of things that these supposedly racist but hyper woke white people do. It's just, why does it matter so much? Now, it's one thing for somebody in 1925 to talk about white racism, 1955, 65. But today, my feeling about it is, with most of the white people that a Black person who talks about that sort of thing most knows, the answer is yes. Most of the white people are probably very slightly racist, but not in any way that will remotely matter in your life, even including being friends with them and sometimes close friends. Why are we so obsessed with that? And I think that's a very legitimate question. Life is about so much more than obsessing over something like that, except that when you obsess over something like that, you're part of a group. It's us versus them. And you have a sense of purpose and a sense of virtue because you're the person who's being racist. But I find that a rather feeble way of going about an existence with true virtue. I've never used that word so much as today.
It might also indicate interference with the process of coming to terms with your own in-group preference and tendency to derogate whatever out-group you happen to be surrounded by. I mean, I do see this as a terribly deep human problem. I presume that in the 1970s that Jane Goodall found that chimps go on raiding parties, right? And that was a major league discovery. It shows how that proclivity to demonize the out-group is at least 6 million years old. Right?
Definitely.
It's deep and it's in us. And so, and we all have to contend with it. And so now we could have an intelligent conversation nonetheless about the manner in which the predominance of one ethnic group in a given society might exacerbate those tendencies.
Of course.
But that's something that's certainly independent of the notion that all white people are racist. Right?
And then you can also see that, it's easy to believe that progress doesn't happen than to admit that it happens slowly. The degree to which most white Americans are racist in 2021, not to mention white Canadians from what I've seen, is much, much smaller than anybody would have expected about 30 years ago. So the question is also just extent. And yet virtue is excellence in my mind. If we're talking about Aristotle, virtue is not moral upstandingness, it's excellence. You can't be excellent. You can't live an excellent life if you're hobbled in distorted views of what racism is and how much it matters. These particular things will not allow you to be the best that you can be, unless you think that the best that you can be is somebody who is hyper articulate about discussing bias against other people. And what a narrow topic. There's so much to do. And so I just chafe against it.
I think that's an excellent place to close, if you don't mind. And I really enjoyed our conversation. It flew by as far as I was concerned. And I hope you
Thanks for having me.
I hope you have the success that you deserve with your new book, Woke Racism, How a New Religion is Betraying Black America. And
We'll see.
I wish you well in the future and hope perhaps that we meet again and at least we're able to talk again.